Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. My name is Rob Skudovic.
And I'm Christian Skudovic.
Thanks for joining us tonight. It's great. I got my son back from college, so he'll be joining us tonight in our waiver wire video. It's the end of week 7, basically. We only have the Monday night game, but we want to give you guys some early thoughts on waiver wire considerations as you're looking at either replacing a guy for injury, maybe somebody who's ineffective, or bye weeks. As you can see on there, the bye weeks coming up. We have Arizona, Green Bay, Jacksonville, the Rams, Giants, and Tennessee. Some of the injury concerns that came up today is Jay Cutler. It sounds like he has broken ribs. It's not confirmed yet, but that's what they're leaning towards. And Carson Palmer broke his arm, so he's going to be done for the year. And then another thing that came up this week is Andrew Luck. We talked about how he's ready to return. Well, he had a setback this week. He had pain in his throwing shoulder, so they gave him cortisone shots and sound like they're going to shut him down in the upcoming week. He's not going to throw the ball. That's concerning for a few reasons. Looks like, one, he won't be back. Two, if you're somebody like myself who has T.Y. Hilton, that's going to certainly lower his value. I was looking forward to Luck coming back. Now, as we give you waiver wire considerations once again, the one thing that I want to say is you have to really put this in the context of your league. There's only so much we know in terms of your scoring system, bench depth, who's available, etc. We'll just give you some food for thought. If you have specific questions, we'd love to hear it. Put it on the bottom of the video here. Message us. We'll respond back to you with specific answers to your specific league and needs. So let's get started with some quarterbacks that you may want to consider coming up this week. First quarterback out there is Andy Dalton, and he's available in 45% of leagues. Now, the first 2 games of the season, he really struggled, and then they fired and changed offensive coordinator. Since then, the offense is starting to look a lot different. They're looking more productive. In fact, and since week 2, his TD to interception ratio is 9-4. He's really picked it up over the last 4 games. Now, today he did give up 2 interceptions, but if you watch the game versus Pittsburgh, both of those picks were deflections off the wide receiver's hands against a Pittsburgh defense that was number 2 in the least amount of points to quarterbacks going into today. So he's got a wonderful matchup come this week against Indianapolis. Indianapolis gives up the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. In fact, today against Jacksonville, they give 330 yards passing to Blake Bortles, and Blake Bortles is not a good quarterback. And so Andy Dalton's got a great matchup next week. If you need a quarterback, he's a guy that you should pick up.
All right, so the next guy is Case Keenum. He's available in 91% of leagues, which is awfully high for, for a guy at this point in the season where it's kind of sometimes hard to come by guys in free agency that we feel like are going to surely have a solid week, and we're kind of really trusting Case Keenum. First of all, when he's filled in for Bradford in the past, he's done fairly well minus that game against Detroit when he had no weapons because,
Yeah, Dalvin Cook had went out that game, and I think that Diggs was banged up, and so he struggled.
Yeah, another thing to note is that they're playing Cleveland, and they give up the 2nd most points to quarterbacks. So that's really huge. We've seen him do it in weeks past where he's thrown, quite a bit of yards and some touchdowns, especially against a bad passing defense. Thing to note is we're not saying maybe pick him up and roll with him for 4 weeks in a row. This is more of a 1-week pickup if you need to get thrown a bye week, or if you had Carson Palmer who got hurt, or whatever it might be. Next, I believe you're going to be talking about the Miami quarterback situation.
Yeah, let's take a look at Miami's situation. Jay Cutler, Matt Morris. So where'd you go with this one? Well, Jay Cutler actually played well last week, and he was playing well today, and then he ended up having broken ribs. At least that's what they suspect at this point. So I'll leave this Matt Moore. Now, is he a guy that you can consider? Well, last year, Matt Moore, when he filled in, actually played well. Over 4 games, he had a quarterback rating of 105, and today he played pretty well. In limited time, he had 188 yards passing, 2 TDs, and only 1 interception. The downside of Matt Moore, at least next week coming up, is he plays Baltimore, and Baltimore is good against the pass. In fact, they give up the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks. So Matt Moore is not a bad option if Jay Cutler can't play, but he does have a tougher matchup, so you may want to look elsewhere coming up in terms of quarterback replacements.
All right, so Josh McCown is another guy available in 88% of leagues. Fairly underrated. We look in the last 3 games. A lot of people might not know this, but in the last 3 games, he has a 7-4 touchdown interception ratio. That's really impressive. That means he's averaging over 2 touchdowns a game in the last 3 games. Started off the season not great, and he's still maybe not great, but he's definitely serviceable, and that offense is improving. Another thing to note is that they're playing Atlanta, kind of just middle of the pack defense as far as what they allow quarterbacks to do. So they're not stout, and there's no reason that they're going to come out and just shut down McCown, especially considering that offense is really starting to pick up. So that's McCown is another option. if you need him.
Yeah, and that's 7-4 and actually over a 4 game. That's my typo. I made a mistake when I took the notes on that one. But yeah, he's been serviceable, like you said. Now, here's one we like to say is don't make any assumptions. Now, we could talk about some players out there that may be available in 90% of leagues, but why roll with a guy that's available who's not going to be productive for you? Obviously, you got to be productive. And so there's some guys out there, and if you look at Winston's available in 11% of leagues, and Derek Carr is available in 20% of leagues. And so these are guys that probably aren't available in your league, but don't assume anything. Look out there. Don't be that guy that misses it. You're desperately looking for a replacement, and sure enough, for whatever reason, he was overlooked or dropped, whatever it is. These guys, they're available. They are out there. Once again, Winston, 11% of leagues, and Derek Carr in 20. Now, the beautiful thing I like about Winston, he's having a very good year, but Tampa Bay's defense is porous. They're terrible, and so they have to throw the ball a lot to stay in games. As far as Derek Carr goes, I'm surprised he's actually available in 20% of leagues, but I think what happened is that the back injury, he'd struggled a little bit the last game he'd played, so a lot of people were gun shy, but we told everybody on our start sit video that he's going to be just fine. Go ahead and roll with this guy. He's an all-pro. He's a quality. In fact, he's more than a quality. He's a very good quarterback. Sure enough, on Thursday night against Kansas City, he had over 400 yards and 3 TDs, so these guys may be available out there. Don't take for granted that check just in case.
Yeah, 20% was extremely interesting to me just because you think about that. That's basically 1 in every 5 leagues that you're in, he's out there. And how many guys do we know that are in 5 leagues? We probably know quite a bit of guys where they're in leagues where Derek Carr is out there. So, like you said, just don't overlook it. Just check. How long does it take? It takes 4 or 5 seconds, whatever.
Take a look, assume nothing. So now we're going to talk about a few quarterbacks for you to avoid, guys that we'd say, just stay away from this week. First group of guys are...
All right, so the first few guys, first one is Trevor Siemian. He's playing Kansas City this week. Nice in terms of matchup, not so nice in terms of kind of how Siemian's been playing. He started off the season kind of hot. I think what was a week 2 or week 3 had a 4-touchdown game, but since then, in the last 4 games, he's had 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And Emmanuel Sanders is looking like he may or probably will be out, and that's a huge weapon for him to lose. So avoid Trevor Siemian. Another one is Joe Flacco. He's looked, from a Ravens fan, I'm a bit of a Ravens fan. I won't call myself a complete Ravens fan, but it's a bit disappointing to see how brutal he's looked. Talked about today, he had just a last-second touchdown to kind of salvage his day, but it was pretty ugly and it was garbage time points, and we really can't trust him to do anything. Even worse, playing Miami, top 10 in fewest points allowed to QBs.
I wonder, I think what happened is Flacco, he missed a preseason with injuries. You certainly see it's rusty. So far this year, he has 5 TD passes to 8 interceptions. Once again, not pretty.
Not pretty at all. Another guy is Mitchell Trubisky, another guy just to avoid. He's going through the rookie growing pains. We don't want to say that he's going to be a bad quarterback forever, but right now he's just not a good fantasy quarterback. Today completed only 4 passes. That's horrible. There are 8th grade quarterbacks down in Texas who are completing, 14, 20 passes, so if he can't manage to do more than that, that's pretty brutal. Another guy is CJ Beathard. Took him 38 passes to throw, 235 yards, and no touchdowns. Was that this last game? Just really unproven, really not stepping up to the plate. Another guy, we don't know. He's very young. His career could turn out, but we haven't seen it. He's clearly not ready, and that rest of that offense is not helping him one bit. So what about your guys you're going to talk about?
Yeah, here's a few guys I would say to probably avoid. Tyrod Taylor. Now, we highlighted him this week in Start Sit video as a guy who had a really, really good matchup, and so we said you could roll with him if you need to, and he might be all right. He was going against Tampa Bay there, but you take away that game against a really porous pass defense, and he's really struggled. He's really dependent on his feet. If he runs the ball really well, but they don't have any weapons. His best weapon, Matthews, just came back. I think he only had 2 catches today for around 13 yards, and so Tyrod Taylor there's just too many question marks there in terms of his ability to pass the ball. I'd pass on him. In other words, Jacoby Brissett, in 6 games, he's got 3 touchdown passes. Now he faces a Bengals defense that is very solid against the pass, so I would stay away from him. And another one you need to stay away from, just absolutely do not even consider it, is DeShone Kizer. Now the rumor was that he started today because Hogan, who played before, had cracked ribs. And so they went back with Kizer today, and he really struggled, had 2 more interceptions. In fact, that gives him 3 touchdowns to 11 interceptions for the year. Now he goes and he plays the Vikings, who have a very, very good defense. And so he's a guy you just need to stay away from. Now I want to talk about some running backs that you should consider. Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray is available in 60% of leagues. Now today he had 18 carries for 113 yards and a healthy 6.3 yards per carry. Now up to this point, it had been Jerick McKinnon had been running the ball and being the weapon there. But what we're seeing with Murray is his carries have increased the last 5 weeks. He had 2 carries to 7 to 12 to 15, and then today he had 18 carries. And I think what's happening there is that he missed a lot of time in the preseason because of injuries. I think he's just starting to get into game shape. And I think that he fills this offense in this role a lot better than Jerick McKinnon. I think if you look at if he can get the carries and if he can be effective, for him to be in the first and second down back is better for the Vikings. So that allows Jerick McKinnon, which I think is a more natural role for him, to be the third down back, be in passing situations. They don't want Jerick McKinnon to have to run the ball 20, 25 games. So Latavius Murray certainly can fill that role. He did it today. He did well. He's a better fit. He's a guy that you need to consider picking up once again. Today he had 18 carries, 113 yards. And next week he plays the Cleveland Browns. So he's got a beautiful matchup next week. Latavius Murray, if he's out there, you got to get him.
All right, now Rob Kelley, coming back after injury, he's actually available in over 50% of leagues. That's because that backfield has been kind of a bit of a mess, and he was injured, and so we totally understand that. But maybe throw him on your bench for depth, or if you need him for this week, pick him up. First of all, we talk about Chris Thompson had some couple of good weeks while he was gone. But they definitely prefer him as a third down back, and they don't really want to use him more. I think they want to get Kelley back in. The other thing is that Samaje Perine has been extremely ineffective, and so it's really just Chris Thompson and Rob Kelley, and we have seen many NFL offenses that are able to somewhat sustain those numbers, but I think Rob Kelley's going to come back in and is going to kind of step in and make that his role again, at least for the most part, especially when it's not third downs. So that's another guy to look at.
Yeah, so much in football is about volume, and he's going to get the carries. They want to limit Chris Thompson's carries. They don't want him to get the probably rush the ball maybe 7, 8, 9 times a game with maybe 5 or 6 targets. And so Rob Kelley's going to get that ball 12, 15, even 20 times a game. So you got to go with him. Another guy that I would consider out there is Jonathan Stewart. He's available in 53% of leagues. Now, somebody's got to run the ball for Carolina right now, and I think he's going to be that guy. Here's what they found out with McCaffrey. McCaffrey is an unbelievably talented guy, but his yards per carry right now are 2.5 yards per carry in the season. Not very good. And McCaffrey's really settling into basically a wide receiver role. That's really how they use him. His carries are dropping. And if you look at Stewart, if you actually study the last 4 or 5 years of his career, he's notoriously started slow and got stronger as the year went on. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him pick it up. Once again, he hasn't been very effective right now, but they're not afraid to give him double-digit carries. He's going to carry the ball. It's not going to be McCaffrey. McCaffrey they use in a passing game. And so he's a guy that I probably would not pick and start right now, but I definitely throw him on my bench and just see if he improves. Once again, it's really hard to find running backs out there this time of the season. So here's a guy that I would go with. And once again, what we've always said is that volume trumps most anything else in fantasy football, including matchups with talent. As talented as they may be, as good as the matchup may be, they have to get opportunities to play.
Especially at the running back position. I mean, a fast wideout can maybe just bolt deep and make one catch for 75 yards and a touchdown. It really doesn't happen and it doesn't happen that often. Of course, you couldn't rely upon it, but it definitely doesn't happen for running backs. They need volume. They depend upon volume. It says a lot about their play.
Yeah.
All right, so Alfred Morris, another guy. If you have a chance to get this guy, get this guy. All right, so Ezekiel Elliott, again, facing the same issues he had, just on and off. Is he going to be suspended? Is he not? At this point, the NFL seems very dead set. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, and we feel it's going to happen very soon, especially before the season ends. Alfred Morris is the number 2 guy, and when Elliott comes close and when he has this 6-game suspension, he is going to be a monster when Morris steps in. He has the best O-line in the NFL, which is part of what makes Elliott so good. But also, Alfred Morris will be mostly the sole back. I mean, he's not going to get 100% of carries. No running back does, even the best. But he's definitely going to be his offense. So I think he could push a lot of teams above and beyond from maybe making playoffs to definitely getting in, or from being in playoffs to winning. So he's a final piece that I think could be a lot once Elliott gets suspended.
Yeah, he's available in over like 90% of leagues. He reminds me of DeAngelo Williams. I had him, I think it was last year, the year before. I can't remember exactly when this injury was. But Le'Veon Bell was missing the first few games. I picked him up, started him like 3 games. He was great. And, he really kind of promoted. He got my team off to a quick start. And so I think that Alfred Morris can do the same thing for whatever games, 5 or 6 games that he's in there. He might push you over the edge and get you into the playoffs. Another guy you may want to consider out there is Dion Lewis. He's available on 72% of leagues. Now, also a guy that his carries have increased. I think they're using more and more. He had, if you go back 5 weeks ago, he had 2 carries to 4, 7, 11. Today he had 13 carries. Last 3 games, he's had over 50 rushing yards per game, and today he finished with 76 yards, so he's getting better, stronger. And he's really good in the passing game, so he's a dual threat. He's really a lot more versatile than Mike Gillislee. And so I think that Bill Belichick's just getting more and more comfortable. Gillislee has struggled a little bit in the run today. The one concern I have for Dion Lewis is I think that Rex Burkhead and White are also very similar to him in terms of they can catch the ball in the backfield, so that limits his ceiling. It's only so high, but he's a guy that you can get some quality points out.
Especially if he fumbles the ball. Then just drop him and just move on because they don't handle that well.
Yeah.
All right, so now we got to talk about this interesting, to say the least, Oakland Raiders running back situation. Lynch is suspended next week. And the thing to note is it's not just a next week problem. This year he's averaged only 3.7 yards per carry. It's just not going well. That's the same that he was averaging before he took a year off with Seattle. And he just doesn't seem to be the old Marshawn Lynch that we once knew 3 or 4 years ago that was so dominant. He's past the age of 30. I believe he's 31, correct?
Yeah.
That's ancient. That's like 45 for quarterbacks. Like, really, I don't know what he's got left in him, but I think this season that 3.7 yards per carry really shows. Additionally, he's got some good backups. Rashard in Washington. Rashard available in 89% of leagues in Washington, available in 93% of leagues. They both show that they could be very good in both short-term fill-in roles for a week or two, but also long-term in the long haul, not only this year but next year. That offense, you were talking about this earlier. That offense is just simply a lot better when Washington or Rashard is in there. And we're talking eventually Oakland's going to kind of wake up and realize that, and I think it's very soon that Lynch is going to lose his role. So pick up Washington or Rashard. It's hard to tell at this point whose offense that's going to be, if they're going to be, split 50-50 or whatever. I know you definitely have your opinion on who's better, but it's just a matter of time before those two or one of those two takes over.
Yeah, they definitely looked better last Thursday night when Marshawn Lynch got ejected from the game. They came in, and I think the offense just moved the ball more effectively. They're able to use these guys in, draw plays, screen plays, things like that, and they just seem like they give them more options. So you're right. Now, the problem with these two guys, like you said, are very similar, and so they often split carries. Though I do think right now Richard is a better running back at this point, at least statistically. He's been a little bit better, but yeah, it's hard. The best thing that could happen is really for one of them maybe to go down, but those are guys you want to consider. Another guy out there, Duke Johnson. We talked a lot about this guy. Now, as far as picking him up goes, he is available in about 20% of leagues, but I would say you probably only want to pick him up and start him or play him in PPR leagues. Now, he is on pace for 70 catches heading into this week, and he was on pace for that. That's a lot of catches for a wide receiver, much less a running back. Well, he didn't disappoint today. He had 6 catches for 45 yards, plus he had a season-high 7 carries. The other thing that's interesting with Duke Johnson is Crowell. Isaiah Crowell is really playing himself out of a job. Going into this year, he looked like maybe he could take that turn, get over the hump in terms of becoming an elite running back, but he's actually stepped back. He looks worse and worse. Today, I think there was a season low yards per carry. And then the other thing that I think makes matters more difficult for Crowell is Hall of Famer, All-Pro Hall of Famer, Joe Thomas left the game, and he might be missing some time with an injury, which I think is going to cause that running game to be more ineffective, which I think they're going to have to rely on the passing game, which gives Duke Johnson greater value. He's out there in 20% of leagues. You want to pick him up, especially if you're in a PPR league.
All right, so another running back situation we got to talk about is the New York Jets. You refer to them as the three-headed monster, and I completely agree. Thing to say is we like all 3 running backs that the Jets have. Powell, Forte, and McGuire. They all look good. They all seem to get the job done. But there's 3 of them, and 3 guys can't get the job done for your fantasy team. And until something happens to shake up that offense, shake up that backfield, we really can't expect anything from one of them. Which one of them each week is going to find the end zone and get the most carries and get the most touches and catches? We were both agreeing McGuire looks great, maybe pick up in a keeper league or a dynasty league, stash him on your bench, see what happens for next year. Maybe something happens. Forte looks the best of them all right now, so I think that he is maybe going to step ahead a bit and get more carries and more catches and more time on the field, as though he has a little bit, slightly. But he's still old, and he definitely doesn't have a future, and it's only a matter of time until they work him out of that offense.
Okay, we talked about a lot here is Alvin Kamara. He's available in about 20% of leagues. I don't know why he's still available out there. He had another good game today. Each week he looks just better and better. And he had 9 carries for 57 yards and 5 catches for 50 yards. He's a dual threat. Really looking ahead to next year. No, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ingram's gone from New Orleans and this becomes his. He becomes a sole back. This becomes his team. He's so good. Not as that value next year, but he has value right now. Once he gets over 50 yards this game, they're going to get him more and more looks. So Alvin Kamara, he's still out there in about 20% of leagues. You got to pick him up. Don't let this guy go by, especially if you're in a dynasty league. A couple things we want to wrap up real quickly here before we get to wide receiver Ginn Jr. and talk about him. Just some final notes about running backs.
So we're talking about the Jacksonville situation. They have a bye next week, and that's extremely important. Having a bye next week doesn't make a lot of people think that that's going to change fantasy impacts, but we want to clarify. Yeldon, 9 carries for 122 yards. Ivory scored both touchdowns. Wow, that's a harder sentence to say than you'd think.
Yeah, they both scored touchdowns. Ivory did well last week too, yeah.
They both have done well, and a lot of people, we were hearing a couple of people get a bit worried about Fournette. But rather the opposite. That should be good news. They sat Fournette intentionally, knowing to give him an extra week off, and they didn't play him because they wanted to just get him healthy and get through, and then keep him revitalized. He's their franchise running back. They want him there for years to come and for the rest of this season as they make a playoff push. So don't be alarmed in the fact that Fournette was not out there playing. He's good to go. He's healthy. He's fine.
Yeah, when he comes back from the bye week, Leonard's going to be 100% ready to roll. This is his team. They rest and they want to piggyback the day out this week with the bye week, and so he's good to go. Yeldon and Ivory don't really have any long-term value, so don't. Even though they had a good game today, that was just a fluke thing. Move on to wide receivers. Ginn Jr. is a guy that you need to start to consider. He's available in 49% of leagues. In the last 2 weeks, he was targeted 11 times for 11 catches, 207 yards, and a TD. Now, what seemed to happen early, and it looked like Willie Snead was going to become the number 2 man, and Ginn Jr. was going to be the number 3 guy. But some things are happening that don't make a lot of sense. He came back from suspension, and they didn't start him right away, and then he didn't get a lot of targets, and now he missed today's game. There's a lot of stuff going out there that seems suspicious, and I'm starting to look more and more like Ginn Jr. May just have that role as the number 2 guy from this point going forward. And so Ginn Jr. being the number 2 wideout with Hall of Fame quarterback Drew Brees is just a beautiful setup. And so he's available in about 50% of leagues. You got to pick up Ginn Jr. He's been looking really good last 2 weeks. He's been very effective.
Another wide receiver to take a look at is Marquise Goodwin. Available in 97% of leagues. So if you're watching this video, he's probably out there, and if you need him, you can probably get him. He was a track star in, was it college or just high school?
I think it was in college.
I believe it was in college. I just like to check. Very fast guy, good burning wide receiver. The problem is he's a bit hot and cold. Some weeks he does nothing. Some weeks he has great weeks. But we wanted to put him in here because he plays Philadelphia, which is a great matchup. They're second most in points allowed to wide receivers. A fast wideout, playing in a great matchup. Got to at least take a look at it if you're looking for another option.
Yeah, and I think another thing that bodes well for him going into this week coming up there is Philadelphia's a good team. Philadelphia's going to win probably by a lot. In fact, they'll probably be playing from behind San Francisco, which means they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. And so that's going to be a lot of garbage time statistics. And who cares if it's garbage time stats? Fantasy football stats are stats. So.
Yes, exactly.
Another guy you may want to consider is Kenny Stills. He's available in about 80% of leagues. Say he had 6 catches, 85 yards, and 2 TDs. Now, with Matt Moore at quarterback, at least that's the way it looks like at this point, that he'll be quarterback at least for a week or two. Matt Moore likes to go to Kenny Stills. Now, I will say this. He's a viable option for you that's out there, but that's only if Parker is out. If Parker ends up coming back and playing next week, Stills becomes a number 3 guy. He doesn't have a lot of value. But if Parker's out again and Stills is out there, he's a guy that certainly is a viable option for you.
All right, here's another wide receiver we're actually fairly excited about. Corey Davis, Tennessee wide receiver, is a first round, 5th overall pick. So obviously they're very excited about him and felt that he had a lot to offer to that offense. After week 1, he had in week 1 he had 6 catches for 69 yards, and he looked really sharp. And then he got hurt. He's due back in week 9, and he's a guy to pick up because when he comes back, we'll think he'll be good, especially in a dynasty or a keeper league. He might not have immediate super high value in week 9, but definitely in next year and in later weeks. But anyways, he'll be coming back in week 9, and he should be out there in most of your leagues. We think he's extremely talented, and there's definitely a spot on that roster for him to play.
Another guy out there is Marvin Jones from Detroit. He's available in about 40% of leagues. Now, after last game, Golden Tate was seen in a sling, and it looks like he's going to miss a few weeks because of an injury. Now, he's a guy that you need to consider. With Tate out there, he becomes the number 1 guy, and so certainly, at least in the meantime, while Tate is out, he's a must-own. Though I do want to caution you a little bit. His last game, he did well. He had 6 catches for 96 yards and a TD, but something to consider once again. He's a viable option, but don't expect him to become a great wide receiver. He did produce those 6 catches for 96 yards on 14 targets, which is a lot of targets. He did against a weak pass defense. He did with Golden Tate banged up. And so you have to once again put that into context. Those numbers can be a little deceiving. Another guy you may want to consider out there with Tate out is Galladay. If he comes back, he's a guy to consider. He's been out. He's missed a lot of games with injuries, but if he can come back and Tate is out. So Marvin Jones out there in about 40% of leagues. He'll have some value for you for a couple weeks while Tate is out.
All right, Devonte Parker. He's available in 17% of leagues. Rob, how many leagues do you think he should be available in?
Probably, I don't know, less than 5%, 1%.
Less, like 0%.
Yeah.
I think no leagues he should be out there. He is the number 1, and we agreed on this, the number 1, the best wideout on that team. Averaging 6 catches for 77 yards per game before injury. And the thing to note with that is the offense was struggling very, very much then. And then he got injured, and they've started to pick it up lately. So he's going to come back into this offense that's kind of starting to figure itself out a bit. He's a very talented guy who is having a solid year. So if he's out there in your league and if you're in one of those 17% of the leagues, pick him up when he comes back, when he's fully healthy, when he is the Devonte Parker that we know he can be. He's going to be a great option.
Now we're going to get to some tight ends you want to consider. Austin Sefarian Jenkins, we've talked about him also a lot lately. He's available in 25% of the league once again. He is now a top 10 tight end, so he shouldn't be available out there. If you have to have a tight end, he's a guy you need to look at. He scored a touchdown 3 weeks in a row. This is a guy that for years they said he's physically talented. His gifts are just unlimited. He did have a problem staying healthy and some off-the-field issues, but he seems to work that out now, and he's got a great role there for the Jets. You got to pick this guy up. Another guy out there is O.J. Howard. He's available in 88% of leagues. Today, he had 6 catches, 98 yards. He's a guy that was drafted in the first round that has a lot of tools. He was highly touted. Now, I want to temper your expectations with Howard. He's very good. I think he's got a bright future in the NFL. But Cameron Brate is very good tight end also, so you got to temper your expectations. They really have good 2 tight ends there, which really does a lot to help Winston. So once again, a guy that you want to consider.
All right, another guy to consider is David Njoku, available in 88% of leagues. He's really stepping into his role and taking over a lot in that Cleveland offense that really needed a guy to step up. He's getting more red zone targets. In fact, he's getting more targets in general. But anyways, he's just stepping up and becoming more productive. If you need a tight end or you're just looking for a young guy to throw on your bench, whatever it might be, he's a guy to look at for sure.
Yeah, right now Cleveland doesn't have a bona fide number 1 wideout, and they're often playing from behind. And so teams like that, to take pressure off the quarterback, playing from behind, have to throw the ball. They'll often use a tight end. It's a safe check down guy, and David will get you, once again, some garbage time stats that will do well for your team.
Another guy is Benjamin Watson. He's available in 87% of leagues. He's not super flashy. He's not a star. But right now he's playing for Baltimore, and it's another situation they kind of need a guy to throw to. And he's kind of stepping up and being that guy to throw to. Not much to say about it. I don't think he's unbelievable, but if you need a guy, maybe you could turn to Benjamin Watson. Look at him if it's the right matchup for sure.
Yeah, it's not pretty. It's not a sexy pick, but it works. And it's going to get you what you need, so he's a guy that you can certainly fill in there. Now we'll look at some defenses that you may want to consider.
All right, so we're going to talk about this Broncos versus Chiefs game. Excited about the Chiefs defense. So that Broncos offense was looking fairly good at the start of the season, but they've really slowed down. That running game has struggled, and Trevor Siemian has definitely been taking some steps back in the last couple of weeks. Chiefs get after the quarterback, will probably sack him, force him to throw some interceptions. I wouldn't be surprised if they absolutely dominated this game.
Yeah, when we talk about defense to pick up, we're not going to share you. Like, Minnesota's a great pickup next week. They have a great matchup against Cleveland, but they're not available out there. So we're talking about defense that are available usually in over 50% of leagues. So these are some defense that should be widely available in your league.
All right, another defense to look at is the Saints. And actually, you did the research and wrote up the argument for the Saints defense. So I'm curious because I have, some of the notes that you said here, but I just want to make the argument here.
Well, there's not much to eat here. I'll say this: Mitch Trubisky. That's pretty much it. Okay, so he's a rookie quarterback. He's made mistakes. New Orleans is not a great defense, but compared to the first 2 weeks, they're actually starting to put some pressure on the quarterback, creating turnovers. And I think what's going to happen in that game is I love a defense when the opposing offense has to throw a ball a lot because it creates opportunities for sacks and interceptions. The Saints are going to move the ball, I would imagine, score some points. They're going to fall behind. Mitch Trubisky will have to throw the ball, and to me, that's just a tasty matchup right there.
All right, another two defenses to note are Philadelphia. They're playing San Francisco. Philadelphia's defense has been much better lately. They've looked very good, and it's a good matchup. The other one is Atlanta versus the New York Jets is another matchup that we like, and Atlanta has a fairly good defense.
Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to message us in the bottom there. A couple of other things to consider is if you want to look at some deep guys, I wouldn't pick them up, but keep your eyes on them. Thompson out there. Played for the Bills today. He put up a really good game statistically, wide receiver for the Bills. He was cut by the Bears. But right now the Bills don't really have any good wideouts to keep an eye on him. Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver for Kansas City, looked really good last week, but it's only been 1 week, so don't get too excited, but keep him on your radar. The other one is Austin Eckler, San Diego running back. Now, he's mostly a third down back, but they're giving him a bigger role in that offense. He's looking better and better. Now, he only has value if Gordon goes down, but he's once again a guy that you want to keep on your radar, keep your eyes on. So we want to say thanks for joining us at the Fantasy Football Profits. Go ahead and subscribe, get our message out. If you have some questions specifically, we'll be happy to answer them. Put them in the bottom of the video. God bless and take care.